Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be talking about A.J. Hackwith's The Archive of the Forgotten and The Gods of the Lost Words. We're going to mush the two stories together. However, I'm only going to do like beat by beat description for The Archive of the Forgotten, which is the second book in the Hell's Library series, and then I'm going to do a much shorter synopsis of the final book because honestly, now, you may be wondering why we are even here when I had the things to say about the first book. Well, that is because I personally believe in most cases, that a book is worth seeing through to the end of the arc to see what possibly the author was going for, if there is observably an arc. If you looked at like Soul Fraud, I looked into the second book to see if it would follow up with some of the things from the first book to see if, an arc was being painted where it looked more episodic. So I let it go. The second thing is like I put up with 6 books of His Name is Augustine to see the whole arc of what the author was doing with Swanee and those characters. And so I could put up with three books of this. That was the decision that I made. But also sometimes like you may hate the first book or you may dislike the characters in the first book, but the author kind of gets a hang either of what they're doing or they're setting stuff up for the long run to reapproach later with consequences, with character growth. That's what happens when you've got a trilogy or a series, is that it can come back to stuff, doesn't always come back to stuff, but I try to give things the chance to show the full scope of what they are doing. Now, I'm not doing that with the Augustus Few because over 1,000 pages is enough for one book, and the second book is going to be twice as long and split into 2 books. So, no. I can't even read that book/series to see if the author is setting it up that those characters are the way that they are because they are what bring on the fall of their people and the destruction of this pre-Big Bang society because they are so selfish. Like, for all I know, everything that I said about Lockett and Lucy in Amygdala was meant for it to be taken that way because they are meant to be just not very smart creatures that are selfish and bloodthirsty and showing you exactly why their society didn't exist when they followed along whatever it is that they decided to do with Lockett in control. But I am not going to be reading any more books in that series. So this is more reasonable, where it was like, combine all 3 books. It was about the length of Amygdala. So whatever. Anyways, we're going to get into it. But I did try to give it a chance to see if Claire would grow because like I know with the way that I do trilogies, the characters go through growth in different books. And so like with Joey, she's got to face things in different books to do different things and then get there. So like I try to give that same grace to other people. I think it was some book with a magician in the title and of like a magician's apprentice or something where I heard the first book really is hard to read because the main character is like so sucky. But then as you go forward, he like learns and becomes a better person. And so I don't mind stuff like that. And I wanted to give this book the chance to show me what it was doing and hope that it wasn't going to go in the direction that it was looking like it would go into. And it did. And the characters all continued to just be tools. They're not like real people. They're not, which is also ironic with how much this book is like, hey, characters in books are real people. They're literal souls. They are their own souls. No, it's so meta that this book has the theme of exactly the opposite of what it is preaching. So anyway, that's why we're here. I was seeing this through. We're done with this. After this book, I'm reading The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham. It just came out in March. So moving on to something else. Goodbye, Claire, with this video. But with that said, before we get started, number 1, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number 2, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number 1 way to be featured is through Lemoy, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in your creativity. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit the first chapter and the cover, that chapter will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. And the third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, judge me as I deserve to be judged. They're available at any of your favorite places. 2 good books. Believe me, I understand if you hate literally everything I do. It's just, that is the nature of the game. With that said, let's jump into this. The first page vibes go, quote, "The arcane wing was a cabinet of curiosities. Libraries have a tradition of maintaining a curio, a house of mathems, oddities, trinkets, artifacts of inquiry. As curators of obscure and sometimes undervalued things, librarians attract the unusual and misplaced. Hell's library was no different. If one was to be accurate, Hell's library was slightly different. What Hell would find curious, others might classify as weapons of gibbering terror. Claire, for one, found it a refreshing break from the books and authors. The objects of the arcane wing each had their own stories in a straightforward way. This dented crown was part of a dictator's deal with a demon, with its spots where the blood rusted through the false gold, stained when his people came for him. These ruby seeds held under the tongue of a desperate child as she braved the underworld to find her lost brother. One is missing, accidentally swallowed, and turned the child into malachite. A sliver of her pinky finger is cross-indexed 3 shelves down. Each item held a story, but the story was done. The end. The unwritten wing hummed with unstarted beginnings, while the arcane wing was sepulchral with artifacts of untold ends. It was quiet, terrible and quiet, and it left Claire feeling like one more artifact, like her story was done and told. Here, the disgraced former librarian of Hell's unwritten wing. See her shadowed eyes, and here are the cracks in her soul, flaws in her craftwork where all of the purpose has sifted out. See how she moves in endless circles to avoid collecting dust. Claire could have settled and accepted her ignoble denouement if she were not constantly being reminded of her ending. The newest reminder sat cross-legged in a puddle of lamplight between tables. She was in the back of the arcane wing, which had been Andrus's prison for Valhalla's ravens. When Andrus had been arcanist, the back wall had been a row of cages, because libraries reflected their owners, that had all been smudged out of existence when Claire took over. Now, instead, smart hickory drawers lined the walls, each identified with a shiny brass nameplate. Interesting that we've already got contradictions here where she hated the unwritten wing for everything that pointed out to her how she was a failure, and that the arcane wing she liked better because it was more distinct, it fit her more. And I get that she can have some character conflict of she is an unwritten artist. Are we going to get to the point where she accepts that she was not a written artist and that is just what she has to accept her fate as? No, she is never going to address her failure as a writer, and she is never going to address the stories that are untold. But also, you would think that she can't be that bitter about her untold stories, which may just be a single story, because it never mentioned any other stories outside of the one that Beatrice came from. So Beatrice's story may very well be the only story that Claire ever had in her, and Beatrice is out in the world living her life. So does she even count as an untold story because she's actually a freed soul? And is that not what she would want for something like that? Because she literally helped Beatrice escape. Why would she be resentful of a fate that she specifically allowed? Another thing that we're never going to get answers for is how she died. That never comes up. She never thinks about her husband. She never thinks about her daughter and whatever relationship she may have had with her daughter, which is only important because Leto is a descendant of her daughter. And so we have no idea if she knew Leto before she died, if she only knew him because of spiritual awareness of being in this realm, what it was. But going back to this blurb, we already have the contradiction of her being I hated the library of the unwritten anyway. That was a punishment, and I much better like this place because its stuff is finished, its stuff is certain, they aren't unresting, it's just an easier job. But she also considers it, well, now I'm also an artifact, so it's an insult and it's a vacation. The only thing that she is actually complaining about here, in my opinion, is that she has an ego, and she feels like her ego was insulted, took a couple of hits because she was released from her position in the library against her own will because she did a terrible job. And she doesn't want to be told that she did a terrible job because she's got an ego, and she is never going to admit that she did a terrible job. She thinks that it was unjust that she was released, and so does everybody else. We're constantly going to hear Hiro and Rami and Brevity all say that she was just the best librarian that there was. And Brevity specifically is going to say how the library was out of bounds and out of its right to kick her out. And Claire will never recognize that she abandoned the library in the last book, that she put the library in danger by trusting Andrus rather than trusting other librarians that came before her and asking them for help. She's never going to address the guilt of or ask forgiveness or have to be addressed at all about her killing of Gregory. Like, that actually makes me mad. I never thought about this before in the last book, but she admits that she murdered Gregory in order to let Beatrice go. And there were no consequences. She doesn't think about it, and it makes no difference to her character. She just, is this because she's dead that she has no feelings of remorse? And now we're going to turn her into a god. Spoiler alert, she is going to become the god of the libraries. All of the libraries. All of the libraries from the other realms are going to come together and use their mental brain power, and also Leto is going to be brought back in so he can use his wishful thinking. And they're going to create a library realm in which she is the god and Brevity is the librarian. So, like, we're going to go through all of this stuff, and she's never going to address any of her failures, her living ones or her dead ones. And she's going to become a god. So that's great. Getting back into the story as it is now, Claire is in the arcane wing, thinking about how it's a demotion and how depressed she is to be away from the books. But it's Brevity's thing now, and she has to make those boundaries for herself, probably because she would start bossing Brevity around and kicking Brevity out and retaking the library position. I wonder if the library can personally just bar her soul because it doesn't want her to be there because she is a failure to it, but also that's not going to be addressed. We're not sure how this is a demotion, though. It feels like it's going from library to museum curator based on the positions. Somewhat archaeologist, if you recover artifacts, if part of this job is going into the world to find these artifacts to bring them back here so that they are kept safe. So again, I think it's just her wounded ego that sees this as a demotion. She really shouldn't be in charge of anything of value after the way that she treated the library. I would not put her in head of this. She should be freaking cleaning the toilets of hell for what she did to the library. But no, she just gets switched into a different department. Ramil is keeping her company here. He doesn't want to go back to heaven anymore. He doesn't want to live in heaven, he's not going to get it. I mean, it doesn't even matter. Uriel just got snapped into oblivion last time. God is missing. That's another thing that will never get answered. You got all of this business going on between heaven and hell, possible war, the freaking Devil's Codex pages in the first book that theoretically Lucifer wants. Lucifer is missing the entire time. God is missing the entire time. And we have no information on where either of these people are. So I don't understand why this was the choice. Now a book character, this girl, shows up shortly with Hero, and he looks like he's playing around with some of the damsels a little bit. He says that Brevity needs Claire, and that's why he has just shown up to the Arcane Wing to get her. Brevity is being visited by another muse from the Muse Corp, who is named Probity. She looks gothic Lolita dressed with pastels and bird skulls and cattiness. Brevity is running the library different than Claire was, which is much more loosey-goosey, and Claire is a little bit jealous and also going, I was always scared to make mistakes. Sob, 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 sob. But Brevity doesn't seem to mind making mistakes. I always had to be a perfectionist, but at least she's cool with being a failure. Probity, the younger muse, also takes an immediate interest in Hero and where his book is because he is her assistant. And Probity obviously wants to get Hero out of the way so that she can continue to manipulate Brevity without interruption. It is so obvious that she is using Brevity. Now, I don't know how long Claire has been away from the library because it acts like it's been a while because Claire goes, well, I have been ashamed of myself and also angry at Brevity for taking my role that I pretty much just cut off all connections with the Library of the Unwritten, even though the Arcane Wing and the library are supposed to be allies and work together. Again, Claire proving that she shouldn't be in this position whatsoever because she can't do her duties out of her freaking bruised ego. But now she's like, okay, so Brevity has called me to come in, so now I should try to fix this relationship since we do need to work together in case something happens. But as she tries to, Probity is there, and Probity is very hostile to Claire, obviously, because Claire is going to get in the way of her manipulation yet again. Quote, for her part, Claire held still, and all it took was a single finger raised behind her back to get Rami to do the same. She reviewed what she could surmise about the muse named Probity. A muse of probity would be a muse of rightness and moral justice, and like all muses, would maintain a fluid identity influenced by the human world. Brevity had always been the domain of women, by matter of necessity. Less air to breathe, less room to speak. Justice, at the moment, appeared to be a pastel-colored woman with a grit of judgment in her eyes. When someone decided to hate you for whatever reason, there was rarely any good in trying to convince them otherwise. So also, you know that it's going to try to be ironic by naming her justice and moral justice and rightness, but she's going to be evil. I don't know how any of these muses or these supernatural creatures vary from humans, because they all seem to be exactly the same as what you would expect from humans. The damsels have apparently made a habit of flying the coop because Brevity is such a loosey-goosey person that they can do pretty much whatever they want. That's not bad per se, but they are restless, and Rosia has gone out 3 times this week. Brevity invites Claire to help get to the bottom of why the books are unhappy. Maybe it's because they're unfulfilled about being unwritten and left in this room for eternity rather than having the fulfillment of being told and shared with the world. I would have figured that the uneasiness of the books would have been obvious because Claire mentioned it in the first book, and Brevity was Claire's assistant for, I'm guessing, all 30 years. So I don't know why Brevity doesn't seem to know why the books are restless. They go to the damsel room to ask everyone what's up when they realize that Rosia is missing again. Because when they got to the library, instead of delivering her, they told her to go and find her way to the other girls on her own, and then they would be along after her. It's no surprise she wandered off when she has a tendency to wander off. Everybody then goes to the arcane wing to look for Rosia, and when they return there, there's a very large lake of ink that attacks anyone who comes near it. Maybe there's a good reason that you all shouldn't keep abandoning your posts, because where did this drip come from, and how long were you gone, and how long does it take to get back to make this huge lake of ink, and why didn't this lake of ink manifest while there was somebody in it? Kind of an interesting choice that you turn your back and then something happens, but not while you're there. They rescue Brevity. Now Brevity and Claire get close to this ink well to try to check it out, and it's grabbing them and lashing them. Claire is going to have an ink discolored hand the entire time from now on. What that means doesn't really matter. It doesn't turn into anything. She just keeps looking at her ink hand throughout. The other characters, Hero and Rami, rescue Brevity and Claire from the ink that tries to drag them in and takes them back to the Library of the Unwritten, where it's safer because the ink isn't there. Everyone is so full of guilt for everything in their lives, and they're just lamenting in all of that guilt. Probity only cares about Brevity's well-being, and that's because Probity is I'm going to use her. She's got the power that I want because she has the unwritten wing. I don't know, I think the arcane wing is probably super helpful too, but you would think that mystical objects would be some sort of good thing to want, but nobody seems to really want any of those objects. Especially considering freaking Andres is in there in a dagger. Get the dagger, free Andres, second attack on Claire. Let's go. You're gonna tell me this fallen sergeant, this fallen second in command of Lucifer that bided his time to try to take over and get into power again would not be willing to overthrow freaking Claire? X to doubt, my dude. So they're all talking about this body of ink that is now in the arcane wing, and nobody knows what it is or where it come from, why it's there, just that it's what stories are made of. For some reason, they expect Hero to know about the ink because he's a character, and you have to know what you're made of, right? Bro, if anything, he'd know less about it because he is from the universe of his book. You would think Claire might know, though she is undertrained. Brevity should know since she is a freaking muse and she carries inspiration around. Or you could ask any of the previous librarians who theoretically had all of this training. There has to be a better way to check than to go, hey, you storybook character who doesn't know anything outside of your storybook. Do you know where you come from? It also should be noted that they determined that the puddle of ink has come from the destruction of the unwritten books from the fire that Andres did that destroyed parts of the books in the library in the last book. Claire awakens in the damsel suite, being informed that the lake of ink was trying to suck her in, and that Brevity was also in the arcane wing and almost died. This is where Claire realizes that she has ink on her that is not going to come off, and it kind of makes her hand feel weird, but there's nothing she can do about it. Claire is feeling insecure and jealous because she is not the librarian anymore, and it's Brevity's area now, area of authority, and you can tell because the library has shifted to be what Brevity wants it to be. Getting a little bit of Harry Potter vibes from this. Claire doesn't believe that the ink of the unwritten can exist outside of the books, and Brevity wants to do an experiment on the librarian's log by trying to put the ink in a pen and then write in the special librarian's log to see if it takes. While Claire is feeling threatened by Brevity's takeover of the library, Brevity is feeling inferior and like she shouldn't be in charge at all because she is so underprepared. Quote, but Brevity could see it now through Claire's eyes, and that empathy threw it all into sharp alien relief. The changes Brevity had made to the unwritten wing no longer felt cheery. They felt garish. Cherry-stained wood, a shade too red and bright, fairy lights illuminating the aisles, cheap instead of cozy. A plastic imitation of the distinguished library that Claire had known. Brevity's heart tilted and fell between her ribs. She kept her face tilted down as she hurried across the lobby to her desk. They try to sop up the ink with a pen, and it works to some extent, and now they have this distilled power, and that's what they're calling it, is the ink is a distilled power that they are then going to try to wield. Claire is worried. Brevity is yelling at Claire that she is just jealous about what is going to happen, and that's why she doesn't want her to experiment with the ink, and that she hates all things creative, which is why she is scared to even bother to do anything with the ink. Look, I don't like Claire, but I can defend her enough to be like, it's not like they just came back from fighting a freaking demon, that they have to make sense of all of this. And it's not like the ink didn't just try to murder them. Who knows? They don't even talk about their feelings in regards to what happened with the ink. They kind of just move on because the story doesn't know what character development is. That's all I'm going to say. Claire and Ramil bicker back and forth, ending with her demanding that he look into where unwritten books come from / where they are made, while she goes to pout. Because obviously she's got gophers to do all of the work. And, well, you would think a writer of unwritten books and a librarian for 30 years would know where unwritten books come from. What was actually included in that 3 years of training that she got? And then, like, did she do any learning in the 30 years that she worked in that job? It's just kind of amazing to think you were there for 3 decades and you don't know anything, not even from the old logs, not even from contacting other previous librarians, when obviously you could because you go back to Bjorn. Like, I'm sure she could have gone to, she knows where Bjorn is in Valhalla in 30 years. The last book was the first time she ever contacted Bjorn, and then she was never like, hey, Bjorn, do you know where so-and-so, like, the librarian before you is, and if I can ask them some questions, especially after Gregory was gone. You would think that they would all be down to help her. Again, another argument for why the library should have more than one librarian at a time, but I digress. Ramil runs into Hero, and now they start bickering over nothing important, and Ramil demands that Hero tell him where he comes from and what he's made of, because that's definitely going to get you answers. Hero says he doesn't know what unwritten books are made of, and we're talking about like the physical manifestation of these books that just appears in the library when somebody gets an idea, apparently. All he knows the ins and outs of his own specific story, but he can't tell you where he comes from. The two agree to go on a secret mission to find out where the materials that form the books comes from. And I don't know about anyone else, but these books were like growling and coughing and giggling and making noises and all of this and squiggling around in the previous book. And I don't need any actual answers to like where the material comes from bodily. I was just okay with they manifest out of thin air because that's actually how ideas work. I don't need a measurable resource because now we're talking about, okay, so if you need a measurable resource like skin and ink, skin like leather and ink and paper. Now we're going, so do they have bookbinding in this place? And does somebody capture all of the unwritten ideas and then put them written so that they can then bind them bodily? It's such a weird direction to go. Hero and Ramil are now arguing about the same thing that Claire was arguing about in the first book, that books aren't actually people, they're books. And Hero is like, nuh-uh, we're real, bro. Quote, no, Hero snapped, then heaved a sigh. Not as books, as people. We're people. not just dusty paper. The muse has always seen us, seen books as individuals, felt each loss individually. It took a toll on her. There are times that I'd catch her staring at the card catalog like a graveyard. She hid it well, but Hero stopped, gaze flinching sideways as if just realizing the way Rami watched him. He straightened, pulling on an attitude like a rumpled vest. He plucked a finger at the gold wool in Rami's hands as if it was a displeasing wardrobe choice. Well, not that I care, but muses are so transparent, and one might worry that it might affect her ability to maintain books. Look, are you more worried about Brevity's consciousness of and consideration for books than about Claire's brutishness towards books? Show of hands in the comments. Would you prefer Brevity, who cares a little bit too much about books, or Claire, who will stab a child in her callousness? Let me know what your librarian preferences are. Hero. And then there is more waxing about how humans make better creations than God. Quote, every survivor wore scars and wariness. Ramil was an angel, the first creation of his creator, but he knew that he was not finely or gloriously made, not like Hero. Now, I know that it was Claire who was mocking Hero being from a book called Nightfall and being a freaking stereotype, and then everybody else has been stereotyping Hero, and Ramil is like, I want to get in on some of that, like, in a sexual way. So I know that Ramil is looking at him differently, but also, blasphemy? Like, maybe you weren't kicked out of heaven because you viewed humans as being worthy of survival. Maybe you were kicked out of heaven for literal blasphemy. I'm just saying... Yikes. Since Claire and Brevity now can't leave their respective places for arbitrary reasons that are not really explained, Hero and Ramil will reluctantly work together. The whole not being able to leave their respective locations is silly when we spent the entirety of the last book not in the library, and we'll spend the majority of this book not in the arcane wing. So like you can't be like, oh, I can't leave now. Why? It makes Anyway, but it is just an excuse to allow Rami and Hero to be the ones to go off on an adventure. It could have just been freaking Claire being like, look, I don't care. Books are not my deal. I don't care what happens to the ink. Get it out of my arcane wing. I'm done with books. Like, just make her mad at books, be done with books. And then everything where they're like, hey, Claire, can we go and find out where books come from? And she's like, no. I don't care. Ramil, you work here. Hero, you work there. Shut the frick up and get back to work. Like, if you're going to let her be ugly, just let her be ugly instead of this. Also, if we're talking about bookbinding now, it makes me wonder what the difference is between written books and unwritten books, since they basically appear the same. But I know that we're in a metaphysical place where existing, but we're bringing in printing presses now into the supernatural world. So I have some questions on the mechanics, and like, are these books are the only ones of their kind, right? So they're like handwritten and then hand bound by somebody. Is that part of Muse Corp's job, is to like deliver unwritten? I'm getting too into it. Brevity is looking over the librarian log for any information and lamenting that the library shouldn't have kicked Claire out. As if she does a good job. There should be like a hotline for previous librarians to just call, because they're all just in their own version of heavens that they chose now. They're all in an afterlife, so you should be able to be like, okay, call for this person and this person. This person is really good at the Dewey Decimal System. I'm going to go with them. Quote, hell isn't about being fair. The rebuttal formed in her thoughts in Claire's perfectly posh voice. Still, Brevity had felt that the library was different, should have been different. The library was not hell. Books were supposed to be shelter from the demons of the world. The decisions the books of the library had made to cast Claire out wasn't what a library should have done. Maybe, okay, just go with me on this, maybe Claire shouldn't have neglected her responsibilities to go off on a wild goose chase for an arcane book and pages that had nothing to do with her job as a librarian. I'm just saying, maybe the books saw how she treated Hero, saw how she treated that little girl. That little girl was clearly not the only character that she had ever stabbed back into the book. I think that the library books, if they are the ones to decide who gets to be the librarian, were in their full rights to kick her out. I mean, does anybody think that she was a good caretaker of the books? She got part of the library burned. I know Brevity wants to defend her boo over here, her BFF. But I think Brevity needs a bit of clarity. And that's not a pet name for Claire. Meanwhile, Brevity's friend Probity is saying things to shove daggers between Brevity and Claire, and Brevity and everyone else, because obviously Probity wants to isolate and alienate Brevity from any of her friends so that she can take advantage of her easier. Then Probity is encouraging Brevity that they can recover the books that were lost in the library to the fire, because you can't kill books. Only humans can kill books or ideas, but them, as muses, can't do that. Quote, Probity's bottom lip worried and caught between her teeth, seeming to hesitate over her words. She took a breath. New books, fresh books. We would replace what the library lost and more. There was a hopeful sunrise kind of light in Probity's gray eyes. Like her entire face was blooming, it brightened her, brought to mind the old games and pranks that they'd played, and made Brevity smile. Now, this brings me to a pause, because Probity is out here wanting to create more books in the library of the unwritten. Now, wouldn't you think that that is a bad thing? Because this is the library that books go when they don't get written, when inspiration is wasted, when authors lose hope in their ideas or don't get to write their ideas before they die. So it would mean that these books are never going to inspire, never going to see the light of day, never get to their full purpose. So creating more books in the library of the unwritten would be stopping inspiration. Which also, if you can just, if Brevity is anything like Claire, which in the last book, Claire was like, stop inspiration from getting to Earth, we need to go, then just shut the valve off, and everybody's unwritten ideas should just fill up the library again, right? I don't know, it's weird. Some of the metaphors that this tries to go for, or the analogies, don't really work to me. Anyway, Probity is encouraging Brevity that they should make their own books out of whatever they find while doing experiments, because obviously Brevity wanted to make her own books. That's why she got in trouble with the Muse Corps in the first place, is she stole inspiration because she wanted to create her own books before realizing, or being forced to realize, that only humans can create things. You would think that Brevity might report Probity to the Muse Corps, because Probity is basically doing what Brevity tried to do, which is elevating herself to the level of human creation, which is not what they are for. You would at least think that Brevity would be like, Probity, look, I've been down this road. It is not good. You cannot do what you think you're going to do, and it is only going to get you in trouble. Please don't do this. But Brevity says nothing on the matter. She doesn't even think about like, oh, this is my second chance to be able to create things like I've always wanted to do. Instead, we get Probity arguing and Brevity just going with it. Quote, you saw one fire, Probity said quietly. I've seen them all. Hero comes back in and Probity gets moody about it and then says that it would have been better if Hero died in the freaking fire, because without a story, he is useless. Like, he's got no purpose. Brevity gets offended, saying, don't say that about characters. Stop it. And Probity tells her to stop being so dramatic. Quote, you saw one fire, Probity said quietly. I've seen them all. Brevity opened her eyes to question that, but stopped. Probity was already lost in thought, looking into the shadows of the library, but seeing something else. They burn them first. The stories. Humans always come for the stories first. It's their warm-up before they start burning other humans. It's their first form of control. To burn libraries, to burn books, to burn the archives of a culture. Humans are the stories they tell. If you want to destroy your enemy, destroy their stories. Even if the people survive, it'll be as if they never existed at all. Brevity chewed on her lip. Humans do a lot of terrible things during war. War, Probity said. And it was caught somewhere between amusement and agony. Shall we revisit the peacetime burnings then? Libraries censored and burned. The stories that died and were forgotten by accident, by neglect, by ignorance, by, and here, the most notorious peacetime murderers of all, by piety. Books burned because they threatened Bronze Age beliefs and scared old men in long robes. I'm not sure if humans have sacrificed more ink than blood to their gods over the years, but if not, it has to be a near thing. Okay, so Probity was the one sitting here telling Brevity to get over it, that the library burned. And then she's like, no, they're all terrible. They're trying to destroy. Oh yeah, and Probity was the one that said Hero should have died in the fire. And then Probity is in the same sentence arguing how burning books is what bad people do. Like, I get that librarians like cry about book burning as if it is part of their soul that is burning, but they really don't care. And Oh, but it's really not that deep, and it does not work in this. It's like it feels like it was just thrust into this as a talking point because it feels important to the author, but it makes no sense for Probity to make these arguments. Freaking Claire or Brevity should have made some sort of argument against Andres last time, but they keep saying that only humans burn stuff when clearly the demon had burned stuff before, and then they also said that demons were the reason why the Library of Alexandria was burned, but they never blame the demons. They always blame the humans for anything burning and act like nobody else burns books while they do this thing. And of course, Brevity doesn't even acknowledge that Probity was just like, didn't you just say that Hero should have died? Probity then reminds Brevity of the time when she ran off with someone else's inspiration, and it just feels like Brevity is feeling so superior to humanity that she believes that she should get to wield inspiration. It's also kind of bizarre that she was kicked out of the Muse Corp because of this stolen inspiration, and she literally still has it and she still wears it, but she has done nothing with the inspiration that she has. And she's also been put in charge of the Library of the Unwritten. Like, at least you would think if she's got stolen imagination, stolen inspiration, and has a room full of unwritten books, that somehow she would find a way to use her stolen inspiration on those books, and then she would basically be stealing other people's ideas, let's be real. In all logical sense, it makes, there's zero reason why she should be in charge of the Library of the Unwritten, especially when it's like only humans can run the Library of the Unwritten. Probity is also out here committing her own treason, quote, "You know," Probity was saying at barely a whisper, as if knowing she was intruding on Brevity's worst memories. "You have to know. We should serve the stories, not the humans. They have been a necessity for a long time, but they're flawed. Humans aren't worthy of the stories we bring them." "What?" Brevity shook her head. "That's not... You can't think of a different way that it could be. But look at it, at least. The whole system is wrong. Why do we expend realms worth of effort, the library, the books, the muses, all of us, to try to entrust our most precious gifts to the most callous, plotting, destructive mortal creatures? Tell me how that makes sense." Maybe. Just maybe. Brevity should report her. Now, I'm not for Hell's HR. Who freaking knows what that looks like? But Probity is sending off my yikes alarm. And then this also has me questioning, like, what do muses even do? Why do humans exist? Where do muses come from and for what purpose? So the purpose is obviously to inspire humans, but you got these muses sitting here being like, we are wasted on them. We should be the ones creating stories, but for like what purpose? What does the creation of stories do? Because like we talk about it on this channel a lot, especially in regards to generative AI and stuff combating that, and like you writing your own stories or doing your own art, and how it is an expression of an experience. It's a communication tool. It is sharing your heart with other people. So at least that's my perspective on it. Obviously, it's different than Brevity's and Probity's and this authors in general. But like, if writing is not a communication tool of like me to you, then what do they view it as? How is it a waste on humans? Because what purpose is it serving these people? Is it a physical manifestation need that these things have? And if so, then aren't they codependent on humans to like get rid of that excess inspiration that they have? Like, we don't have any idea what any of these things are. And at the same time that it's constantly saying how terrible and horrible humans are and we should take all of the power away from humans to be able to create, it doesn't say what the creation of any of this stuff is. It's so insane that we could go from the first couple of chapters in the first book of like, stories are special and they are parts of human souls, to whatever this is, where it is actually constantly insulting creators and creativity. Because now it just feels like Probity is assuming that humans make stories for them, which I highly doubt it. Quote, Brevity hesitated. Humans are special. They can create stories and destroy them. But humanity creation takes a soul. Does it? Probity asked, and the question had such a fine razor point that Brevity stopped. What do you mean, does it? Does it really take a human to make a story? I mean, yes, they spin up the pieces, but they seem to need an awful lot of help from us. Probity paused and leaned closer, hesitant, as if it were a bubble between them that might break with the slightest wrong word. What if we took them back? We could skip the middlemen. What if the stories were ours? You would think that Brevity would be arguing stronger against Probity, because Probity is literally insane right here. If you go by what we've learned so far and knowing that Probity is evil and just trying to subvert this because she's insane, you would think that Brevity would be like, bruh, either tell her that she is insane and argue with her stronger, or have Brevity start leaning closer into that thing because of how much she wants to be able to create. Probity asks a good question here when they're the ones who bring the inspiration. I know that we're talking inspiration versus creation, but that's just thought versus craft. And the way that this is talking just makes it sound like humans have no souls and they are just puppets for the supernatural to inspire, to diddle-dally around, like a mouse who inspires the Sims to move around the screen. Probity, the little sister in here, is now harassing and pushing Brevity to revolutionize the library by becoming a writer using the ink. Quote, "Sis," Probity touched her shoulder, looking at her with all the worship and steady belief of a child reunited with her hero. But they weren't the eyes of the youth anymore. Probity looked at her with the certainty of hope. But what if it's what you are made up for? Librarians have always been revolutionaries, right? Brevity thought of the logbook, of Poppaea's rebellion and Gregor's skeptical pragmatism and Floor's unorthodox means. She had to nod. Probity smiled. Maybe this is your revolution. The system is broken. It's got to change. Maybe you're the one to fix it. It was an alluring thought, one of the stories and quests, but Brevity's anxiety was quick to remind her of the other way those stories ended. But what if it breaks instead? You can't break something that's already broken. Stop protecting things that you could make better. Provity's hand slid down her arm, then dropped hesitantly. She gave her a slip of a smile to soften her frustration. Please, think about it at least. Look, her saying that you can't break things that are already broken should be Brevity's sign to just discard everything Probity said. Probity is insane. She is so insane she can't even hide it. And yet Brevity is still going for it. Because reasons. And I don't know how Brevity isn't more concerned about this, considering why she was kicked out. Also, Brevity should be far more concerned than what is coming off in this scene. Again, I give her the credence that she could be tempted by this because she always wanted to be a creator, but she should at least be having an internal struggle of like, I know better, but I hope, but I know better, but I hope, you know, in the same way that I'm like, I'm not going to be taken advantage of by somebody. But at the same time, is like when somebody DMs me asking me to do something for them, I'm like, they're going to take advantage of me, but I hope. And it fails every time. I digress. Also, revolutionize and the system is broken. Can we not? This is such a trope of the idea of freaking librarians that think that they are the front line of free speech. I'm sorry. I have seen too much in regards to the ALA in the last couple of years. I feel like every person throwing these words around so clumsily into this story is like Daniel Green. And the freaking librarian smuggling lesbian cowboys that I read about 2 years ago, it's just buzzwords to feel important, but you have no idea what you're talking about. Now we switch over to Andres is gone. Claire is going on about how bad of a job he did taking care of the arcane wing and how much he tortured other creatures for just the fun experiments that he did. None of this was in the previous book, by the way. Claire was friends with this guy for 30 years. He was her mentor, and she never once, even in internal monologue, mentioned that he did a garbage job and he tortured animals in the arcane library, but she let it pass because she needed him. There were different ways that this could have been introduced, but it just wasn't. So now that he is gone and now that he is an obvious bad guy because of his thing he tried to do in the last book, now we can character assassinate him. She's also talking about how Bro would torture animals for the fun and make excuses that everyone was an animal, so obviously proving that Andres was Fenapil. I wonder if Locket's head is in the arcane wing. Claire is also going through files to look for records on ink, going through the arcane wing like it is now, but to no avail. She's finding this has never happened in the history of forever. Andres also left behind a raven that may or may not be from Valhalla. Remember the Raven way from before where they like went through? Well, this raven is one of those ravens, except she is not a shifter like all of the others. Her name is just Bird. Very creative. We know why Claire failed as a writer. One of his I'm sorry, that was mean. One of his experiments. Anyway, Bird was one of his experiments. She follows the raven after it gets her attention and finds a figure that she calls a haunting. It turns into an every person mirror, and she finds the runaway character, Rosia, communicating with this runaway character. Rosia tells Claire to just watch and communicate because the thing obviously wants to talk. The every person approaches the ink, puts its hand in, and kind of goes into it. The every person also takes Rosia protectively, and they walk into this inky void together. Claire is declaring now she must get Rosia back from that ink because the alternative is worse. I don't know, Rosia went into this thing of her own accord. I think she's probably fine. Now we go to Rami, who is organizing files for Claire. She deserved to be outed from the library so hard because she doesn't freaking do anything. He appears to Claire having just missed what happened with Rosia. Ramil gets permission to do whatever he and Hero were going to do in secret, and Claire doesn't need to know about it, doesn't want to know about it, but permits him to go and do what he wants to do. This chapter ends with Rami thinking, quote, Hero might have been an ass with overconfidence in his charm, but Rami had sworn to protect all the residents of the library. That included stunningly perplexing dead women and insufferable men with broken books. Now you'll notice, if you read this book, all of the characters act and think the exact same in this book. Why is Rami mimicking Claire in any way? No character has personality, only narrative stated personality. Switching over to Hero, and he is angsting because he just can't help it. Quote, the problem with being made from a book, Hero had decided, was that everyone thought that they could read you. The firmly held belief that they could look at you, read you once, and know the entirety of your contents for eternity. That a book was simply the sum of its text on the pages. It certainly felt like more than that. From the inside, Hero resented the simplification of it, the way that Claire and brevity mattered between them, dissecting terms with the important capitalizations like narrative and story and point of view, as if as a character his thoughts were prescripted, and he was merely a composition of cogs and bits to be taken apart and reassembled. How ironic. Granted, they never talked about him in specific in that manner, but being the exception was no comfort. It felt condescending, like a hall pass. At his heart, he knew that he was still a story with a broken book, but a story. He didn't know where that left him anymore. Not immutable, but also not a cold assemblage of parts. Perhaps he was a draft, half-born but unfinished, unruly and unfixable. Yes, Hero could definitely be that. Hero's got paper for an interior library loan so that he can leave the library with Rami, and their first destination to search for the origin of unwritten books is Elysium. This is explained as, quote, why not start with the Greeks? Hero made a broad gesture. I've had a lot of time to study the librarian's log lately. A shakeup, the last big shakeup, happened under the tenure of a Greco-Roman librarian. Claire and Brevity are astonishingly tight-lipped about it. Seems as if she tried to start a bit of a war. If their rebel librarian was sent packing to the library wing in Elysium, we can get some answers. Rami is already getting confusing feelings from Hero touching him just to start awkward, unnecessary tension. And then Hero ends up teleporting on his own because the interlibrary loan only moves him, and it sweeps him off of his feet away from Rami as Rami is thinking about his weird new feelings. And then Rami has to get to Elysium on his own. Now, with Hero arriving in Elysium, he is going to be required to pay a respect to get through the gates, but this ends up with him running from some guardian lions and getting pummeled by a golden lion. What a book character could even offer as entry into the afterlife, I'm not really sure. He doesn't even have a book to be like, here is, my origin. It really doesn't matter that he was told to offer something or pummeled by lions and chased by lions, because immediately the lions just get up. It's quickly resolved without anything. Then the lioness who pounced on him appears to lead him to where he needs to go, and Ramil is already there. He is getting jealous of some effeminate boy who is a scantily clad younger man from Elysium who is flirting with Ramil. The people there ask how he got past the entrance without proving himself, saying that he's not a usual hero. That's the end of the conversation. They don't get any more information about him, about how he got past the entrance. The two say that they are here on library business to see the librarian of the Unspoken, because that's the library in Elysium. So now they're going to go and do that. Returning to Claire, she is suddenly talking to Walter, who I thought she had killed in the labyrinth in the last book, but he's still around, gonna be around. I guess it was silly of me to think he was dead, because they're all supernatural beings anyway. He is now explaining to her that you don't wear someone else's ink. That's bad. And also, inspiration never dies. And also, death only exists to give life meaning. Quote, "Nah, ma'am, death just is. It's the container that gives it shape and makes what's inside important." Walter shrugged suddenly, seemingly shy as he fetched a broom and began to sweep the ashes with surprisingly delicate movements. "Without the boundary that marks beginning to the end, what matter would anything have? I reckon life inside of the jar is special because of what is under the glass. Break the glass and nothing is destroyed, but everything changes." I really don't like this idea that life only has meaning because it's limited, but that's all that I can really say on that. I think that there are more curious ways to examine life and spirit and like the purpose of what people are here for or where to get value from. That is more than because it's limited. It feels on the similar level of trying to give value by saying life is suffering and suffering is what makes life beautiful. I don't think suffering is what makes life beautiful. I think the people that you love are what make life beautiful. I think honoring and caring for the people that you love are what makes life beautiful. Not freaking suffering. Like, you can grow and get past suffering, but I don't think you I just don't like the lionizing of suffering. But that's just a me thing. Claire then goes, quote, "Claire began to nod, and her mind snagged on the hook of that idea. She let out a soft oath. She had been hunting ghosts, talking with death, and staring at colors, when the reality was right there. The answers had been mocking her to begin with. She just needed a point of comparison." So yeah, it's just this vague sake of hiding stuff from the audience for the sake of hiding it, because this is where the chapter ends. She gets this epiphany, doesn't tell you anything about the epiphany, but just that she has one and that we're going to go in that direction. Ramil and Hero are then talking to the lady who runs the library in Elysium, and she says that to find what they seek, they need to talk to someone else, and then leads them away. In the Library of the Unsaid, they just follow the librarian. Hero feels bad about himself and then says that no one likes a villain. For all of the villains out there, though, bro, let me assure you, being a super hot villain, which is how he is described, the outlook is good. The outlook is actually fantastic. And he's a villain because he was a revolutionary against a tyrant. Like, this was just another, let's make him technically a bad guy, but he is not allowed to actually be a bad guy because then you can't like him. He's a safe bad guy. To prove Hero wrong, feel free to list some of your favorite villains in the comments. Personally, I love Handsome Jack from Borderlands 2. He is a great villain. Going back to the story, all the while Ramil is fingering unsaid things, Hero is judging them for being lazy about not caring if they are heard, while also eyeballing Ramil in a sexual way as he touches those spines, thinking how hot it is, the way that he fingers the books with his eyebrows lifted. They listen to some random voices of unsaid that hint at the answer might be in the Arcane Wing. They're like, what the frick? The answers are in the Arcane Wing and Claire doesn't know? Claire has been moping around, so why would she know that the answer to where books come from is in the Arcane Wing? She's been flipping through pages. Let's not pretend she at least has not been flipping through freaking files. Though it is obvious that she just doesn't know where to look, and the Arcane Wing doesn't manifest the answers that you're looking for, it seems. They're also hinted that they should talk to the muses, and Hero is like, yeah, let's do that. Muses are the inspiration carriers. I think I would have gone to them first, especially considering you have a resident muse in the library. To chase down the answers, Claire decides to sneak into the library and bother the damsels. First, she demands that they help, assuming that they must know something since they are made of ink, and obviously everybody made of something knows exactly where they come from. The damsel closet doesn't have any information, so Claire takes a blood sample from an older woman in the closet, an ink sample, if you will, by stabbing her and collecting it in a vial. Brevity interrupts the transfer going on and is very offended that Claire snuck in and also harmed one of the books. The ladies of the ward are thinking about how Claire's violent past is coming back to them, as if this wasn't her normal. The way that it's written insinuates that she stopped being violent at some point, but she never did. Brevity demands to know what the frick Claire is up to, setting her foot down to protect the books from Claire. They butt heads over Claire not being the librarian anymore, though Brevity is. Claire considers it cruel to be reminded that she has abandoned her workstation in the arcane wing, and then she is kicked out of the library. Claire is like, I just wanted the blood to do experiments. Is that so wrong? Maybe ask instead of sneaking around if you don't think you're doing anything wrong. I think the fact that you knew that you needed to sneak to get what you wanted may be a little bit suggestive. I'm just saying. Plus, the two wings are supposed to work together. Plus, Claire is supposed to be friends with Brevity, but they have gone so far from each other that she is sneaking around and then rejects that she does anything wrong when she does some stuff wrong. Probity reappears to Brevity, telling her that she did the right thing by kicking Claire out. Brevity is like, you don't understand our relationship. That was really hard for me. Claire was a great librarian, okay? She taught me everything that I know and was amazing, and she's just much firmer than I am. How are you talking about both sides of your mouth, okay? You're saying that she was just firm and there was nothing wrong with her and she was the greatest librarian ever, while in the same breath saying that she was abusive to books? Probity comes clean that she stole some of Claire's ink that she had, and the two of them, Brevity and Probity, hug because now they are besties. Quote, it felt warm. It felt sincere. It felt hollow. That was fast. Is Brevity going to say anything about this feeling hollow or about her not trusting Probity? Nah, she's just going to go along with all of it. Getting to the Muses, Hero and Rami then run into Probity, who insults Claire and humanity more by calling them parasites on books. We still need to then know what the purpose of books is, if not for humans. She's trying to convince Hero and Ramil to turncoat on Claire. There's no subtlety here. Even without them on her side, yet she tells them more than she should and worries that she has when they part. Ramil and Hero want to go and talk to different muses about where books come from, which also, they mentioned not knowing this, and Probity just laughed at Hero and then stops them from talking to anyone else by yanking the realm away so they can't get back to the realm, or to the realm at all, where the muses are. I don't know why Ramil isn't going to tell Claire what Probity is up to, because clearly they should not be trusting. And then Ramil is a freaking angel, okay? Go and report her terrible self. The teleportation Probity did likely should have killed Hero. We're talking about the Muse Corp teleportation, but it didn't thanks to Ramil. As if this wouldn't get back to anybody that she tried to kill some people with what she did. Don't worry, it doesn't get back to anybody. They land in some other realm, and Rami says that he likes Hero sometimes when he is being haughty. They have to go through judgment in this new realm. I don't even know what you would do with a book that fails judgment, because it's a book. That question doesn't really matter because they're gonna storm the drawbridge anyway. Hero was harmed during judgment, so Ramil has to bring him to Claire, explain what was going on, says that Brevity isn't a real librarian and they need her help to take over the library from Brevity's incompetence. What an insult. Claire is going to sew Hero's book back up and try to fix him from the damage that happened in Judgment. Ramil is trying to push romantic feelings into this because the book has done nothing to show the romance happening at all, but for some reason it thinks it needs it. Quote, the ink had already faded, and the skin was pulling together nicely. He'd be sore for a couple of days, but mobility would be an issue. Even outside their books, characters were remarkably resilient. Hero and I both have a particularly checkered history when it comes to romantic entanglements between unwritten books and authors. I'm not saying the attraction isn't there, but the pull between an author and a book, even a character, is too messy. I care for him. I will continue to care for him, but I will not lay claim on him. That's not what love is. Rami was quiet and stunned for a moment. You're saying, I'm saying nothing. But that Hero is not mine. At least, he is no more mine than you are. You should see to your own feelings. No use denying it. I see it there behind those atrociously serious eyebrows. Hero has that effect on people. Claire orders Ramil to take Hero back to the library to make sure that he doesn't reopen his wounds, and immediately she is insulting him again. Quote, paper cut? Are you mocking a man wounded in the line of duty, Warden? Always. Claire made a dismissive wave with her good hand. Ramil carries him away princess style. Ramil and Hiro are then back in the library of the unwritten. Brevity is not there. Hiro then decides that she is probably left for trivial reasons, not worth mentioning to anybody, so who cares? They visit the damsel closet for a dose of self-doubt on whether he is a person or a book, and then he says that he needs to run an errand instead of staying put like he was told. Hiro then goes to Claire to tell her to test the rogue ink out on him and his book so that they can get answers faster if you can do anything with the rogue ink. They bicker about him putting himself in danger, and also we have another round of confessions where Hiro says that Ramil worships Claire with so many feelings that he has. I can't believe that we don't get to see any of the emotions, but we're just told, not even by the person themselves. It's freaking Ramil tells Claire that Hiro loves her, and then Hiro out here telling Claire that Ramil loves her, but like neither of them are. Maybe they're just shit stirrers. You know what? I'm gonna go with that. Maybe they're just shit stirring to see if Claire falls for it. She waxes on about how Hiro and her have become family through hardship, which I wish we had seen that. Again, it feels like this is pushing harder verbally things that aren't actually built into the story. Claire eventually agrees to try and put the ink in Hiro's book. Then we switch over to Brevity. Brevity has brought some other muse children into the library of the unwritten to coax Brevity into making up their own stories. And if they make their stories, then they can save them from the nasty human burnings because they will be made by muses, so they somehow won't be burned. These things don't really work together. I don't really know, like, if the muses made books, like, I know that they can't, but if the muses made books, then what would they do with the books? Because at this point, if they're not connected to a human soul and communication, like, what is the function of a book? This little experiment of feeding the two baby muses inspiration and ink and books turns them into little hungry monsters for creativity, drug addicts, if you will. And now Pravati is like, no, let them eat. It's fine, quote, because they fed them the special, quote, what if we gave them a book? Just one. Pravati was warming to the idea, scanning the shelves thoroughly. There are so many. We could pick one that never is going to be written anyway. It's the library of the unwritten. Aren't they all destined to never be written? Like, because Bjorn said that he knew Claire's books before she was even born, which means that they existed before she lived and died, which suggests to me every book in the library of the unwritten was always doomed to be unwritten, and they're timeless. I don't know how else to make sense of that. Because they know that they need to feed these little ink goblins something, they decide that they're going to go to the Dustwing, the dustbin, as I call it, to feed them some of those, because those are already completely forgotten stories. They're not just unwritten, they're completely forgotten. Quote, the Dustwing, she whispered, and the dread grew. The Dustwing wasn't just a tomb for books, it was a tomb for stories. The Dustwing had no librarian because these books were not destined to be curated, cared for, or read. A book only fell to the Dustwing after an existence on Earth, after the very last copies of its story had been destroyed, the last lines from its text forgotten. So this is where burned books go, and I guess Probity wants to burn the remaining ideas of those books. You would think that books whose authors died unwritten would also end up in the dustbin. Not to say that in reality there are not books that the authors die and then somebody picks up the books, you know, like Wheel of Time. But when books die and they go unwritten, or they are burned, or they disintegrate from being in a drawer too long, it's not just burned books that are forgotten. Probity begs Brevity to go with her to help with these two baby muses because she doesn't want to do it alone. Brevity has to gauge if she is a librarian or a muse first, and then chooses Probity, walking out into the sunlight hand in hand with Probity. Claire then tries the magic ink on Hiro's book and forces it in, which actually causes him to remember the beginning of his story and is subsequently sucked away, possibly returned to his book. Ramil then shows up again in the arcane wing, notices that Claire is out of her sorts, hears Hiro is missing, and they're going to go and track him down. We can't use Brevity because she is not in the library. There are no questions as to why or where she is, which maybe you should consider. Maybe they should worry considering the recent war, but whatever. No questions asked. The library isn't even closed. It's open. I don't know how there aren't demons all over the library, sucking on the shelves like freaking bees in a hive, but here we are. Hiro wakes up in the dustbin and is trying to get out. It is spooky. Claire then goes to the Library of the Unwritten and is surprised that Brevity isn't there, is wondering what has happened. She looks at the librarian's log and sees that Brevity is feeling alienated, writes a note while beating herself up on letting this relationship between her and Claire falter. She and Ramil then teleport to the Dustwing because the note left by Brevity says where she was going. They hear a scream. She knows that it is Brevity. Ramil tells Claire to go after her, and Claire feels so overwhelmed by this moment that she kisses him and then runs off. Brevity is over here feeding the little baby muses with Probity, and now that she's seeing it, now that she's seeing the destruction of the books, it's bothering her. Claire shows up to stop it. Probity sicks the muse monsters on her. Brevity is paralyzed with indecision on whether books or Claire matter more. You'd think that if she was just having issues of watching these muse babies consume books, she would know kind of what to do, at least for Claire. Now, since Ramil is off on his own in the library, he actually runs into Hero. They kiss, fight off one of the corrupted muses because there were two of them and one of them is fighting Claire, and then the other one was just kind of skulking around, stuffing its face. Hero shoves a book into its mouth, shoves his book into its mouth, which gets eviscerated, so now he has nowhere to return to. There is a fake hero death just to allow Rami to just cry fountains over this man. And don't worry. Rami says that he found Hero because Hero has a soul, and since he's an angel, he was able to track Hero down by his soul. They giggle, and then they decide that they need to find Claire and Brevity in order to help Claire out. The group is now fighting the other muses. Claire is attacked, screams, gets eaten by ink, and is consumed. They try to contain / bring back Inky Claire and eventually slap her with Brevity's stolen inspiration. So ink is souls, obviously, which is why Hero has a soul and is a soul, and now the ink is trying to swallow Claire whole. Brevity is to try and tell Claire a story to bring her back, so now she's lecturing Claire as her story. Quote, "It wasn't fair. Claire was the storyteller, not Brevity. The only story Brevity ever had, she stole. This was all on her shoulders, and they would die here in the ink because Claire wouldn't listen." "You're so stubborn," Brevity hissed through clenched teeth. A watercolor of frustration took on the bold strokes of anger, and Brevity let it. "She was so stubborn, this woman in the library. She was so selfish and mean and lashed out at everyone who tried to help her. She wielded a blade against books and words against everyone else. She was so wrapped up in her own self-pity, so certain of all that she had lost, that she couldn't see all that she had gained. All of us that were right there in front of her, and hurting and confused and scared just as much as she was. She was right there." Brevity's eyes were full of tears. Perhaps that's why she couldn't make sense of why the ink moved over Claire's skin now, rippling, shifting, almost drying into black scales, half fractured and curled in on herself as she was. Claire looked like a dragon's egg ready to hatch or rot away. Brevity held on to her anger. It felt solid in her chest. It was the only thing that kept her pinned here, wherever here was, beside Rami's hand. She was selfish and cruel and acted like it was all because she was smarter, stronger than everyone else. But she wasn't. She was just stupid, so stupid she couldn't see her friends that surrounded her, the women who were not her enemies, prisoners, or rivals, but friends. She was so stupid that it took death of hundreds of goddamn wonderful people to realize it. It was all your fault, Claire, okay? I'll finally say it. It was your fault, and none of this would have happened if you had just talked to me, and not... A shiver started somewhere distant and rolling right through Brevity's chest stole her breath. Black scales began to flake and peel. Just beneath, were the tiniest freckles of brown hair. Distantly, Brevity realized that Remy was praying. It seemed fitting, trapped in her own confessional. "I blamed you, Claire. I said it. I didn't, but I did. And then, when there might have been a way to fix it, you just gave up. When it was no longer your job to care about the books, about me, you just gave up." The world spun as if she'd lost touch with the ground again, which was strange because Brevity couldn't even feel her toes. She was fairly certain that it was her turn to melt. "I'm here to make you decide right now. Whether you are giving up on yourself or not, you're not a story, Claire. You're a human. You're my human. And if you end, I'm ending with you. Hero just threatens Probity and says that he is a character without a book, so she can't really threaten him. Probity calls him an abomination and then leaves without a fight or a word or anything. Ramil says peace to the girls and then breaks his trans-like state that he was kind of in. Hero continues to have an identity crisis since he doesn't have a book anymore, and now they are returning to the Arcane Wing with Hero carrying Brevity and Rami carrying Claire. I know, nothing came of that screaming of everything was friggin' Brevity's fault for blaming Claire. Or back in the Arcane Wing, everyone is waking up just fine. Brevity still acts confused, like she doesn't know what Probity was doing, despite Probity literally ranting to her about what she wanted them to do together. Then they recap to Claire what had happened, and then she seems confused to find out that stories are made of souls, but this was literally said in the opening chapters of book 1 that, like, Hero couldn't meet his author because he was a sliver of that woman's soul, and then she would never meet anybody that understands her the same way. But now Clara's like, you what, mate? Quote, stories. She meant stories, but if they're made of the same stuff, then that means stories are made of souls. Brevity's eyes went wide as saucers. No, Claire whispered, and Hero's heart dropped. He felt irrationally disappointed as she started shaking her head. It shouldn't matter, her reaction, but somehow it did, because they were talking about what he was, and she was, and I would have known. I would have had to have known. Gregor would have told me, or the log. Claire straightened as if she'd touched a live wire. The well. Rosia, I need to see the well. And now they're talking about Probity's last words before she left, which is this calling card that she has of ideas never die. And Brevity explains, quote, it was something that we said back then. We thought that we were invincible. We thought that we could do anything. When I was a muse, we... Brevity chewed her lip raw. Claire appeared to be having an argument with a black bird ahead of them. At least if she was that irrescribable, then Hero suspected she'd recovered all right. Muses are obsessed with humans, but we're not taught to care about humanity as people, just as creators. The end creation is what is important. Ever hear about an artist wrecking themselves for their art? That's a bad muse. An internalized capitalism. Sounds like a form of terrorist gang, if I'm honest, but this is so dumb. Like, what does capitalism mean to freaking supernatural beings? Is there now... What does the Muse Corp do with books? And if there is... And I don't understand how to conceptualize this. Like, internalized capitalism is an artist who is driven to destroy themselves to create because of a muse. What does that even mean? Somebody please help me. I know that I'm dumb. That's why I say I'm an idiot at the beginning of these videos, because, like, I can't make sense of that. This is on top of Brevity helping Probity this entire time, by the way, getting around artists and doing nothing to stop her when she was eating books. Like, the lack of agency here is also jarring. Everything just happened around these people, and they are like in a theater just watching it happen. Even when they disagree with something, there is nothing they can do. Brevity didn't even try to punch Probity in the face to stop her or fight her to the ground. She just, like, stood there. Rosia, the character who disappeared in the ink forever ago, now reappears, and everyone is like, how are you alive? And she says that she's not a ghost anymore because she found herself in all of these other stories, and now she's just revived. I'm so glad that things change in the story with nobody actually doing anything. It all happens off screen, and then they come on screen to tell you about it. Great craftsmanship right there. Quote, it took a while, but I found myself in stories, and I don't want to be a ghost. I'm not a ghost. You're not a ghost, Brevity repeated with a little awe. Everyone looks for themselves in stories. I certainly don't, but I digress. I look for the story in the story. And that feels like a very author inserty right there. Quote, I am my own story now. The first thorn of defiance pricked through Rosia's voice. She paused, considering, or I am many. I haven't decided yet, but I am Knuff. You know, it's kind of funny how easily the female characters in this, like, come into their own outside of their book, and Hero is like, the frick am I? I don't exist. What am I? Do I exist? Do I have a purpose? He is constantly just... But then you've got Rosia, who's just like, ah, and she just comes into her own. And Hero isn't even inspired by seeing this. I also have to ask, what does this even mean in the lands of books? Coming into your own, finding yourself in stories, like you could find the same archetype in a bunch of different stories. So there is that, but I don't know if that would mean what this is implying it to mean. Hero then tells Claire not to feel bad about mistreating books all of these years. I love this abusive apologia. That's a word. But he's like, you don't need to feel bad, okay? You were kicking us and stabbing us and doing all these bad things to books all this time, but you didn't know that we were souls. You didn't know that we were people, so you can't be blamed for it. And Claire tells Hero that he isn't an abomination, being a character without a book. Then Brevity and Claire hug out their differences and cry on each other. I like that we saw no interaction between these two people this entire time, but now everything is falling emotionally into place. They all then just reiterate how they only just learned that books are souls, and that's why they are valuable to demons, and all hell will break loose if anyone learned that. But again, this isn't a revelation. It was said in the first book, and it was said that's why the demons wanted to eat them in the first place, so I don't know why this is the revelation here, where they're acting like it didn't exist. So that's the end of book 2. We're going to go through some of the notes for book 2 and then the synopsis for book 3. So hold on to yourselves. Hook. I tend to expect book 2s in a trilogy to be more emotionally driven or emotional depth than the first book and then the third book, because you're dealing with the fallout from the first book and then you're gearing up for coping mechanisms and growth that are going to be used in the third book, usually often. And this book isn't any different. Claire is moping, Brevity is moping, Hero and Rami are left to do most of the normal stuff, but Hero is also moping. Rami doesn't really care that he left heaven behind. I don't think he really wanted to be there, personally. Hero wants to know what to do with himself because he has no purpose. He still finds no purpose, mind you. And then Claire is just hanging around, resenting her failure in the arcane wing when she is attacked by Ink. There is no sense of urgency. There's not really any plot. She's not doing anything to resolve anything that happened in the last book. And she's not even thinking about how what she did caused the burning of the library and that she shouldn't have trusted Andres in the first place. Like, there is no reflecting on the choices she made that got her into the situation she's in. She's just mad that she was fired. The language and the writing. This book spent a lot of time repeating the same things over and over again internally through the 4 different perspectives. It felt like it lacked for ideas on what to do, so it did that repetition instead, especially with Hero, who just sort of existed to question his own existence, while also asserting that he's real at the same time. Stuff like this didn't help. Quote, hero or villain, either way, there was no question what shape Hero would have taken, no choice, no abiding randomness of opportunity. The idea that creatures like the cursed nymphs existed to just step in and out of another's skin, their reflections, rather than pests, rendering a tree hollow. Everything should know their shape in Hero's mind. His book was broken, yes, but he was still a book. He'd been shocked to not be the protagonist, but he'd long since adjusted to his nature as a villain. As long as he knew what he was, he knew the thrust of his story, being nothing but was reflected by others. That wasn't a story at all. Letters, confessions, dedications. Rami muttered again, slowing as he scanned the shelves. His profile was lit by the eerie stone-split sunlight that suffused the entire library. It painted gold coins on his olive skin. Remarkable. Humans are remarkable. Humans. Not books. It was always the creators, not the created. Hero sometimes wondered why anyone bothered to preserve him at all. Still, curiosity got the best of him. Hero drifted toward the nearest shelf and plucked a short scroll from the top. I want you to know that I never regretted it, he read under his breath. Not one moment of my life with you, no matter how the end comes now. Choosing you was the best decision I ever made. You are... Hero frowned and rolled the scroll gently before returning it to the shelf with a huff. What nonsense! Who would bother to save all of this sentimentality? I would have thought that you'd understand, Rami said with a contemplative look, losing the chance for closure with people that you may never see again. As far as I am aware in book 1, Hero never didn't know that he was a villain. He explained it previously when Claire got mad at him for not telling her that he was the villain, that she made an assumption and then he didn't think that he was going to be around long enough for it to matter. So I don't know where it comes from that he never knew that he was a villain. I just don't think that it mattered because I don't see the way that it introduced books in the first book as like the villains of a book disliking the author, because the author is they are a part of the author, so there's already going to be an affinity towards the person. Getting into the world building, just the more that you get in this world, the more broken it gets, at least in my opinion, if that's not obvious from like the details that I share. Quote, "The library is hiding something, I'm certain of it, but an immortal secret is not going to be solved by one soul. So I put forth the charge to you, future librarians, discover the secret of the library's existence. Take what I have learned and add your own under the log index entry MR. In my time, it was that which was sought after for medicine, knowledge, and purification. Knowledge purifies. We serve no one with ignorance. I believe this little logbook can hold our secrets secure. And maybe one day it will hold the truth as well." So the logbook should hold all of these secrets, and Claire had 30 years with this logbook that was specifically marked with myrrh behind stuff that they had confirmed were truths and not just opinions or thoughts. And yet Claire was still completely ignorant of everything that has to do with the library. I'm not sure what she spent 30 years doing, honestly, except for like stabbing characters. As Brevity and Probity talk about getting more books in the library of the unwritten, we have to look at this quote, "But the unwritten books will outlive us all. The curse of the unwritten book is to never truly live, but exist forever." And yet they wanted to create more. I don't know, maybe their better decision would have been to finish the library of the unwritten. Quote, "Men condemn themselves to hell, but who passes judgment on mere books?" I don't think treating books like people is good world building or helpful. It just creates another rung of exactly the same thing. Like books being part of a soul is different than a human, but still meaningful. And it's far more interesting and nuanced than books are people too in the exact same ways, basically, with the same rules, really. And now we have to think of how books are judged. Finally, quote, "Churches gave sanctuary in my time to the unwanted, the unloved, and also the criminals, whether they repented or not. I don't know why a library in hell shouldn't be a kind of church. Lord knows that we have enough altars to longing, to regret, to mistakes here in the stacks. Few souls find a way down here, but if they do, what shelter we can provide, the library should. Libraries have always been a kind of church, a kind of sanctuary." What a very strange parallel to make, that libraries are a religious structure. Like, you could have just left it as a sanctuary, as a hiding place, a getaway, someplace to keep you safe and like give you a home away from horrors because you can sink into a book or whatever. But like, likening it to a church, specifically a place of worship, was bizarre, beyond the fact that we know that it's going to turn Claire into a god, and so it was just another way to be like, worship Claire. Getting into the characters of this book, the characters all had no personality of their own. They just parroted each other in different narratives in their dialogue for the purpose of the story. And the only new character who really came in, not counting any of the side characters that were just in Elysium and then never came back, Probity was the only one, and she was just pushy, but she made arguments that didn't make sense with what she was saying. Everyone relies on Claire for everything, and only Claire. They undermine Brevity as a librarian. Brevity undermines herself as the librarian after being a librarian's assistant for 30 years. She has zero confidence in herself because they've all got to nonstop glaze Claire. And then you've got Hero, who in the beginning of book 1 was obsessed with this hero, saying that she was perfect. We never saw him fall out of love with her. And that would have been an interesting thing to watch as he gets further away from his book and understands his author less because he is changing, and so he can no longer be a part of that book. And he was finding himself. But then, like in future books, in book 3, I think it is, he accuses his author of never caring about him and that he never cared about his author either, which is blatantly untrue. The plot of this book ends up being, where do books come from? They go on a quest to find where books come from by talking to people, but they already know that books are souls. And then Probity tries to steal the ability and then just attacks people. Like, I don't know, she was a very weak villain in my opinion. Getting into themes and like the other notes section, at the end of the day, I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to take the blurbs from the beginnings of these chapters, as you would think that they would be knowledge written down by previous librarians, and the logbook decided what was important enough to keep because Claire had tried writing in it before, and then it would just consume what she ate and not show it if it didn't think it was important. The logbook either just takes contradicting perspectives because reasons, or they're meant to show world building Then they show genuine world building when things don't fit together. So that may also just be faulty perspective. However, then that gives you no one to trust the whole way through on like figuring out how anything works. Here we have a brevity quote. Characters. Boss says that they're just characters when I press her about the damsel suite, as if characters are just ish thing to be. They're people, essential, intense emotional lives, scrubbed down and stripped away and honed to a cutting edge. That's how you fascinate a reader. Characters are more real than real. That's what fiction is. Why else do stories make them suffer or make them change? They're mirrors and foils. They muse. Every muse is taught that. We fall a little in love with every character we meet. Maybe the story of humanity is learning to be brave enough to be a character in their own story. Also, quote, so much frivolity and fuss over the human soul. You've got to wonder why. What makes the stick-aroundness of humans more special than, say, a muse or a demon? But all the realms seem intent on hoarding the stuff, gathering souls, preserving souls, rescuing souls, judging souls, eating souls. If you wander into the wrong neighborhood, let me tell you, for someone with lifelong experience owning one, a soul is not that shiny on the inside. A grand bother it is. We spend half of our life worried about preserving it, then the rest of it worried that we haven't spent the currency well enough. Better if we never knew that we had one, in my opinion. Life is for the living. Leave worrying about souls for the dead. But there is no chance that we'd be that sensibly ignorant. Not in a world so lousy with stories. Souls, pesky, powerful stuff. I don't think there's anybody in this book to actually like. The continuing narrative throughout is just like this hatred for people and that people can't do anything right and people suck. And like, it's a really weird juxtaposition to have this worshiping souls and the creativity and uniqueness of humans, but at the same time, anytime it comes up, it's insulting and then trying to divert it to like, oh, Hero is a soul and he is better than humans, but also the damsels are better than Hero. I'm not saying that the author has to believe that every human is irreplaceable, but it truly feels like a bait and switch to open up with how special creation and art expression are and how it comes from an individual soul, and then change it so drastically into humans suck the narrative that crosses 2.5 books. Souls are stupid and art isn't from people. This book does everything that it can to suck the fact, and the third book does it too, to suck the uniqueness out of the fact that humans make art. That it's all a supernatural thing, that the supernatural use humans as paintbrushes to create, and that's all that humans are. It's the opposite, and that may well be the author's theme or intent, but that's enough to make me really not like this book. It's such a it's such a sad, pessimistic point of view. The last thing to note in this section is, quote, the best of humanity can be found in hell. I'll fight any theologian on this fact. Hell is a place you sentence yourself to, which by necessity requires a solid bit of self-reflection, or, the very least, a death's bed awareness. Mortality has a way of forcing one to be honest with oneself. None of the frivolous barricades we erect in life withstand it. You find the failures here, but you also find the strivers, the yearners, the eyes open enough to see the distance between where they are and where they could have been. Hell is a place for the dreamers that have woken up, and the book's still asleep. In both ways, hell is a place ripe for stories. So hell is the place that you want to be, apparently. I'm a little tired of the intellectualism that hell is for good people. Like, okay. If that's what you want to go with. Overall, ironically, this novel makes it so that there is no risk to life at all. That there is nothing. You're just a jar, and death only exists to give you some kind of value because it's limited. So, like, we're only going to print 200 of this book, and that's all that's going to be, and that just gives it value because it's a limited edition. Otherwise, nobody cares. It takes all of the power and love and uniqueness from humanity to say that everything is worthless and people existing is dumb. Now, finally, we're going to do a very, very abridged summary of book 3 so that we can all be happy that we know the end of everything. So General Mathis has come to audit the Arcane Wing since there are characters roaming around freely when they're not supposed to be. They haven't been doing their paperwork in the Arcane Wing or the library, and they find nothing is correct. Mathis walks around the arcane wing to just kind of do a visual audit. She's also going to do a paperwork audit, but she doesn't find anything out of the ordinary as she's walking around. Rami shows up with a hot little palace from Elysium, making Hero very jealous. Once Malphus leaves, Claire is informed that the Queen of Elysium wants to see her. It turns out that Elysium's people want a sanctuary in the Library of the Unwritten. With the constant references of the library as a sanctuary and suddenly saying Claire's never turned anyone away looking for a sanctuary, it's very untrue. She stabbed let's not forget she stabbed a little girl at the beginning of the book, looking for sanctuary from the horrors of her book. She she also stabbed her freaking mentor. She was a stickler for the rules, theoretically, so Sanctuary would break that. But also, who is going to hell for Sanctuary? This makes no sense. And the only reason that it feels like it's here is to glaze libraries more because the author has a particular thing for them. I think that I could have accepted it better if the Unwritten was in purgatory and that she had actually had visitors who were souls passing through purgatory that she, gave house to, but we only ever saw demons reading books. But not whatever this is, and not turning the library into a literal religious symbol. It's kind of weird. It's kind of something. And yes, by doing this, it is foisting Claire as a deity, if not a deacon. Because if a library is a church, then a librarian is the leader of a congregation. She's a holy person, what with her powers and responsibilities, making her a saint, and it's kind of gross to me. Somehow, in the court of hell now, they have no idea that Andres is missing or that the library went under siege because Claire is trying to hide the surplus of ink that came from the destroyed books, and they were not aware that Andres had set stuff on fire. I don't understand how everybody is just so freaking clueless in hell that there is no oversight at all. Claire is also surprised that any demon would ever run inventory on the library because Malphus has now realized that the inventory, the paper inventory, does not match the physical inventory. I like that the previous books kept throwing humans under the bus as the sole book burners, and that villains in book 3 also want to burn down the libraries and the arcane wing. As they talk about evacuating the library and letting the books live their lives, you get this exchange, quote, "People are not a cause," Hero said, almost to himself. "You admit that you're granting stories personhood? I'm not in a position to grant anything. We should not be in the business of arbitrating the worthiness of souls," Claire said harshly. They were all facing her with an encouraging look. She frowned. "Don't you dare try to give me a gold star and a pat on the head for finally wrapping my brain around the obvious and performing the bare minimum of humanity." Claire continues. "What?" Claire couldn't help her skepticism. The memory of Probity's accusation was still too fresh in her mind. "What do humans do besides burn and destroy?" "Rebel," Brevity breathed, more animated every moment. She drummed her palms on the book in front of her for emphasis. "It's all right here. Create and rebel. What's more human than that?" "Oh, I don't know. Cruelty over superficial differences, sticking flags in things, frozen yogurt, performative gender roles, war." Hero counted off his fingers. Claire was well practiced in ignoring Hero by now. She tilted her head at Brevity. "I don't understand." This is the third book, and she's done nothing to learn or grow and just hates everything. The world, all of the people, all of the books. How can you appreciate books and characters and still talk about how all humanity is such a negative, terrible thing? And why is she so annoyed that Hero is backing her up on how terrible everybody is? So Malphus succeeds in burning down the arcane wing for no apparent reason, and Claire is trying to keep the Library of the Unwritten safe by deciding that they just have to make it its own realm. You know, the way that you stop destruction is you take it and move it somewhere else. And so if she can move it out of hell and try to do the rebellion that her predecessor attempted, then she can make it safe. As Claire gets closer to becoming a god herself, quote, "Both of them looked at her like they were waiting for a lifeline of wisdom, a deeper truth to make what they had seen make sense. But that would just be placing her understanding above their own, giving Rami another god to look to, and Claire felt nothing like a god. Her back hurt too much for one. They gather the librarians from all of the other realms. They gather Leto from wherever the frick he was, and he was in some position where he was guiding people away from heaven, because who wants to go to heaven anyway? And so he's going to help redirect people to the new library realm later. But they all just imagine this new realm, and they get all of their powers together to imagine this new realm and then tell a story, an origin story of the library realm. And Claire becomes the god of the library realm, and Brevity is the librarian. And Claire is like, well, I'm going to live longer than any soul will as a god, and then I will eventually fade away when people stop believing in me or something like that. But it is still a longer life than others get to live, and I will feel blessed for it. Aside from that, I gotta mention, Andres comes out of the dagger and helps Claire with fighting demons, no problem. So there's no talking about the betrayal at all. They don't rekindle their friendship or mentorhood or whatever it is he just comes out, then he's fine and he's trusted, and they just fight things together. Also, the book could not stop saying how heavy a raven was when it sat on Claire, and it broke me out of the story every time because ravens are not heavy. But so that is that is the main of book 3. I told you it was going to be super short, but at least you know it now. The library got its own realm, and Claire is the god. With that said, that was Hell's Library Trilogy. Let me know your thoughts. Have you read these books? Will you read these books? Looking forward to your thoughts down in the comments below. With that said, have a great weekend. Thank you for going through this with me. I appreciate you being here just to listen to me jabber, especially knowing what you're getting into with this book. Anyway, have a great weekend, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?